How's it going?
Good morning. Doing well. How about yourself?
We're doing good over here. Doing good.
Excellent.
Good morning.
I see Gabo here as well
GM.
as a listener.
Hey guys, how's it going? This is James.
Hi, James.
Hey Nevin, nice to meet you over Twitter.
Likewise.
Is
Best way to
Gabo
meet.
a speaker? Oh, he's a speaker. Got
Yeah,
it.
no,
Yeah,
I'm
he's
here.
here.
Thank you.
There we go.
Thank you for the invite.
Hey, Gabo.
Amazing. What's happening, Gabo?
I'm good. I'm good. Excited about this space. So, it's always exciting to talk about what we're doing.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Where are you two based, if I can ask?
I'm currently in San Francisco.
Amazing.
And this city gave me another opportunity. It's a city of dreamers. So I know many people rant about San Francisco lately, but I always meet a lot of amazing new founders coming and dreaming, wanting to change the world with technology. I had that dream myself. I was a crazy one in my country, but here I feel very well welcome. And actually, thanks to Nevin, I'm here.
Amazing. Well, pleasure to have you both and Reserve. Just very excited to chat with you folks. James, thank you so much for the introduction to the team. And thanks to everyone for joining. So, to set some context on why we're all here, we're here to talk to Reserve, which is stablecoin protocol, and they're doing a lot of interesting work in Latin America. Also, in the space of DAOs, we're seeing a lot of interlap between a lot of treasury management and stable token projects. And so we wanted to chat with the team and bring our crypto economics team here at ConsenSys together and really dive into what the future of DeFi looks like with Reserve. So thanks for joining us. So
Great.
To kick things off, maybe we can do a bit of an introduction. I guess first, maybe we can introduce the crypto econ team. So maybe James and Marta, you can introduce yourselves, and then Nevin and Gabo, if you can introduce yourselves and Reserve to the group, that'd be amazing.
Sure thing. So my name is Marta. I'm with a colleague of Matt's and James's from ConsenSys, and we are all gathered under the umbrella of a crypto economic team, which is a really, really cool team, I must say. I joined only recently, so I'm still really hyped about it. And we do research and some analysis, but also internal development and strategy on everything that has to do with Web3, and big part of our team is focused on crypto economics and tokenomics, and that's James's role mostly. Me and Matt are mostly focused on community building, DAO engagements, building relationships with DAOs, and all sort of other cool things. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Marta. Yeah, I'll go ahead and briefly introduce myself as well. Super excited to be speaking with the Reserve team along with its community members here. I've been with Reserve ConsenSys for about like 8-9 months and focused, like Martha said, on the crypto economics objectives, which kind of run through like 4 pillars. Just to be quickly review that, it would be like along the sides of like investments, and so like ConsenSys treasury portfolio, working through things like tokenomics, doing workshops with both crypto native and non-native protocols and teams, along with helping out with the DAO space. And to tie it all in, we try to do a lot of research, whether they're protocol specific like Reserve, and thematic stuff as well. And so we do a lot of great work internally, and we thought this would be a great opportunity as we do more research to get community members involved and learn about, in parallel to as we're learning these protocols, it just makes us a better community overall. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to connect with Reserve. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having us. I'm Nevin. I'm the CEO here at Reserve, and was one of the original founders. So just, I oversee many different facets of the project, but these days, Gabo and I sort of share that responsibility in a pretty significant way. I mostly focus on the protocol side of things, and Gabo mostly focuses on the Reserve app side of things. Those are kind of the two different pieces of our project that we'll probably get into talking about today.
Yep. I'm Gabo. I'm Venezuelan. I've been trying to change the economy of my country using cryptocurrency for quite a while, even before joining Reserve. Like Nevin mentioned, I focus primarily on the Reserve app, which internally we call RPay. That focuses on the access to regular people to the stablecoin to be used as a currency on the regular economy. So that's my main focus on how we divide the responsibility internally.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for introducing yourselves. I'm like super excited because I've been looking at Reserve for quite a while, and I think there's a lot of great things that you guys are working on. And I think, from my understanding, there's been AMAs that you guys have been doing for quite a long time, and so I think that our community members that are, on the spectrum of being super well versed and knowing, up to date what the Reserve protocol has been doing, but also members that are just learning about Reserve. And so I thought for this kind of session, it would be helpful to both have a bit of an introductory question as to how Reserve might be different from some of the other stablecoin platforms out there, to getting deep into the weeds of what the implications of, let's say, a DAO, governing some of these stablecoins look like in the future. So before I start with like any questions, like Matt, anything that you wanted to share, or perhaps dive right in?
Yeah, I would love to just dive right in and maybe get just a very broad update on what's new with Reserve, and like what new things are exciting you and the team.
Cool.
Yeah. So how about we do this? Gabo, do you want to go ahead and start and kind of talk about the state of things with the app, and then I'll discuss the protocol side?
Yeah. We on the app side, there is a social issue that we're trying to address. Basically, in the world, wherever you are located in one region, in one country, you have different level of access to a stable currency. You can see this more, even with more emphasis precisely on high inflationary countries or hyperinflationary countries, where people many times are under capital controls, or the local economies is very hard to access for the regular people to have access to any stable currency. But not only is the access to a stable currency, when a currency increases the volatility, also other financial services become more limited. Access to credit, access to insurance, access to opportunities to protect the value of your work, or even to receive payments, are all things that get damaged basically in that situation. So with cryptocurrencies, and in precisely with a stablecoin, there is the opportunity to address that social issue, because by us, the society, accepting it as it is, what we are basically accepting is that we are going to be broadening, or there is going to be a broadening on the gap of inequality between the different areas between different countries of the world. But cryptocurrencies allow us to understand that money can be truly global, and allow us to understand that it can truly be accessible. So there is this social issue that we as a society, we as a humanity have the opportunity to address, and we particularly focus on addressing that by going into the most difficult market, by going into the areas that have struggled the most, to understand and to provide the accessibility in a convenient way that they can use it on their everyday. So that has been basically our go-to-market strategy and our focus by iterating and understanding the problems and making it usable, not as a cryptocurrency or DeFi on the RPay side, but precisely as a currency. And we have initially started by going to Venezuela, Argentina, Colombia, and so far we have about 600,000 registered users, and over 16,000 merchants that are currently active on the platform. And it is primarily used very much as a currency. People protecting their local what they're earning in crypto, but at the same time spending it in many different merchants, or sending it peer-to-peer to different people in a regular day-to-day basis, without they even worrying about the technology or the aspects that makes this possible. It means that we are enabling this technology for Luis, for Maria, the one that sells fruits in the corner, or the little corner store, or the moms and pop shops. Like, this is truly being aimed at the regular people, and addressing that social issue that we're doing. So that is basically has been where we are nowadays on the RPay side.
Thanks, Gabo. And a couple more things to share there. So we, at this point, that app does a bit over $100 million worth of transaction volume per month. And in crypto, you hear a number like that and you're like, that's not very big. These exchanges do billions a day. And that's true. It is small in comparison. But the thing that's so exciting to us about it is that, as Gabo said, it's really people using a stable coin as ordinary money. It's people buying things at the store, just moving their money in to protect their purchasing power, and sending money to friends and family. And recently, we reached the point where, for a long time, the most common way to get money into your Reserve app account was you would convert fiat currency in. So if you had money in Argentine pesos or Venezuelan bolivars, for example, you could convert your money in order to have a stable savings account, essentially. And recently, it switched, and it became that the most frequent method for money landing in your account is just receiving it from another Reserve user. And we looked into that. We did a survey of some of our users to try to understand, is that predominantly remittances or is it something else? And it turned out the number one reason for that was payroll. Like, people were actually, the dominant reason there was people just getting paid directly in Reserve stablecoins, which we're just super excited about, because it really shows that, there's starting to be that circulation, there's starting to be that use of a stable coin for the normal economy, predominantly in Venezuela, but also a bit in these other countries. So that's the progress we made so far with the app that we're super excited about. And there's, anyway, I'll let Gabo talk about the future of that in a bit. But now the other half of the project is the Reserve protocol. And the Reserve protocol it's kind of very different. Like, the app is, it's kind of more like a normal company. It's like a normal startup of like, okay, let's make this product, let's get it out there as soon as possible. We'll add lots of different features, on a very quick succession, and adapt to our users and so on. The Reserve protocol is totally different, because it's much more like, okay, we have this really, really long-term vision over the course of 30 years or so, for where we think we can get with money in the world. And then we're just very carefully and calculatedly, slowly building and preparing to try to make that happen. And we won't really know for sure if it's going to work for many more years. So let me describe that vision briefly. So Um, One way to think about this, about like sort of how money works today, is if you're a wealthy person and you have a lot of money, if you have, you know, in the US, if you have like more than like $1 million, you definitely have, you know, somebody managing your capital, and you don't have most of that money in cash. You don't actually have over $1 million US almost ever. Instead, you hold a very diversified portfolio of assets, right? Of stocks and bonds and real estate and so on and so forth. And so, if you're in that position, you actually don't really have to worry that much about inflation, right? Like people these days are concerned about inflation of the US dollar, but that actually mostly hurts people who don't have very much money, who tend to have a larger portion of their wealth in cash. If you're a wealthy person and you have most of your money in assets like that, then let's say the dollar were to devalue 20%. Okay, so in that world, you know, prices across the board, you know, not all exactly the same, but roughly would go up by 20%. Rents would go up by 20%. So would food prices and gas prices and so on. Obviously, there's like supply and demand for gas, but like generally, prices would go up like 20% if the dollar devalued 20%. Well, in that world, if you're a wealthy person with one of those super diversified portfolios, your portfolio would also go up in dollar terms by about 20% as a result, as a direct result of that devaluation. And so for you, your purchasing power would actually stay pretty much the same. You know, you would be able to sell your assets for 20% more dollars and then purchase the same goods and services. And so the basic idea in the long term for the reserve protocol is, can we actually make it so that everybody has that sort of access to stability, and actually tokenize a really diversified portfolio of assets similar to what wealthy people already use to store their wealth, and make that universally accessible and really easy to use as a currency. And actually, instead of having this intermediate of sort of selling those assets for a currency which could potentially devalue or fluctuate, and then spending that, could we actually just use that broad diversity of assets in a tokenized form, as you know, in a single token, to spend? And so it's kind of a crazy idea, and we really don't know if we're going to be able to pull that off. There's a bunch of challenges that we can get into that we have to handle to pull that off. But today, the thing that the protocol side of the project is working on is really the first fully featured release of the Reserve protocol. For a while, we actually mostly focused on the app as an entire project. And so we sort of put all of that long-term vision on hold to sort of start solving the short-term problem. And then we've gone back to solving that long-term problem. We're close to releasing the fully featured version of the Reserve protocol. Now, the protocol actually allows anybody to create a basket-backed stablecoin on Ethereum with any set of ERC20 tokens that they want to start off with. And they can also specify any governing mechanism. So they can connect it to basically any DAO contract that they want, or even govern it in a centralized way if they wanted to, although people might not want to use that coin. So interestingly, the approach we're taking there is a little bit like Uniswap, where anybody can deploy a Uniswap pair. And so you get, you know, I mean, this number's out of date now, but like last time I checked, there was like 35,000 Uniswap pairs because anyone can deploy one totally permissionlessly. And that's the same approach we're taking here. We don't exactly expect there to be, you know, tens of thousands in the way that it makes sense to with trading pairs. But the idea is to make it so that anybody can sort of try their own experiment with a different kind of basket of assets on Ethereum, and also different kinds of governing protocols, because you know we're still very, very early in this whole progression of kind of the tokenization of everything, and you know, and using crypto as money. And so we actually thought, rather than having just like a centralized team that's doing like, you know, a specific path that we think is the best, we thought it was the best to build that protocol as a platform and allow a whole lot of different experimentation. So there's some natural things that we think that protocol will be useful for in the short term, based on tokens that already exist on Ethereum, thanks to many DeFi protocols and tokenized fiat currencies, where basically you can start to have interesting baskets of assets that use kind of DeFi derivative tokens and have interesting financial properties. And you can start experimenting with the decentralized governance of those baskets. But that all, you know, and that we think could get very big and could be very interesting in the DeFi space. But it's all truly actually just preparation for this future where lots of different assets get tokenized, which we think will happen. And if that really does happen, then having this protocol and a community of governors in order to start producing those sort of asset-based currencies, that's truly the thing that the Reserve Protocol team is preparing for. So that's kind of our long-term view and what we're up to.
I absolutely love it, and I'm right there with you. I think we all are. Tokenize everything. Ethereum's enabling this Web3 world where this is becoming more and more real. I know James has a bunch of questions on tokenomics. Hopefully, I can just touch on one point which you mentioned that's interesting to me. By creating a protocol and more of a platform type structure to achieve this goal. I was reading through some of your guys' docs or like the website, and it looks like you guys have these like guilds, tribes, different working groups kind of structured to power the protocol. What's kind of the dynamic between your existing like engineering team or just core team and this almost DAO-like delegation of roles? Like, are you guys aiming to be full DAO, or are you looking to just DAOify parts of the organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. So on the app side of things, that will continue to be a centralized company because it sort of is a normal software product. We have to handle private customer data, so on and so forth. Lots of regulatory compliance. So that'll continue to be a company on into the future. On the protocol side of things, it will become more and more decentralized, and actually each individual R token, we call them, each individual stablecoin that's deployed on top of the protocol, like I said, can be governed however the creator decides. But in general, I anticipate the vast majority of those will be governed by DAOs. And those DAOs don't all have to work the same way. They can work in different ways, and we anticipate that they will. But the initial governance mechanism that we're sort of baking in as like the default, so you can sort of just check a box and use the default, is essentially the same thing that was invented by compound finance, which is essentially ordinary token voting. The difference is that it only allows you to govern a reserve stablecoin as an RSR holder if you've actually staked your assets on that particular stablecoin. So it's not that all RSR holders collectively govern all stablecoins that are deployed in the protocol. Rather, you get to govern the ones that you have sort of put some skin in the game on by default. And then for the protocol organization overall, I think you can expect it to look a bit like the Ethereum ecosystem over time, where probably for quite a while there will still be a centralized body, doling out grants in order to help organize capital in the ecosystem. But over the course of time, the independent projects that are part of it will be a bigger and bigger piece of what's actually moving things forward.
And if I can ask you a question, what is the biggest challenge that you have experienced up until now? Because I can imagine it's, on the adoption side, it could be regulatory. I'm really curious, how has the development gone, and what are some of the like interesting, unexpected challenges that you've experienced?
I guess Gubba might have some things to say on the app side of things because
they're different on the different areas.
Yeah, on the protocol side of things, I mean, one recent challenge that we've experienced, as everybody in our community knows, is just the extraordinary complexity of implementation of this protocol. Where it's actually funny because we sort of keep thinking it's going to take longer and longer, and our sort of expectations seem to somehow match the ETH merge. As the ETH merge expectations move back, so have ours. So I guess it's a similar type of extreme complexity and needing to get it right. But yeah, that's been a challenge for us. Where essentially, the protocol that we're developing is on the order of the complexity of like the Maker protocol, maybe a little bit more complex in terms of lines of code. And so we're taking an extremely cautious development approach where we have multiple versions of the protocol that are each running, and we have tests that sort of prove their equivalence so that our programmers can reason about it better, etc. and that just ends up taking like a huge amount of time. And so it's been really stressful for us, you know, trying to move as quickly as possible, trying to you know, explain to the community why things take that long, and at the same time being completely unwilling to make any security compromise, because obviously if we release this and it gets hacked, it's just completely useless. So at least in recent memory on the protocol side, that's really the biggest challenge that we've concretely been facing.
Yeah, on the app end, in order for the stablecoins to be truly used as money, the transition between the local fiat, where the people is already using on their local economies, to the stablecoin, it must be seamless. People cannot wait for it multiple days, or it must be seamless. And in order to achieve that, in different emerging markets, the banking infrastructure is completely different. But there is also like you mentioned, the regulatory complexity. Even though it may sound that it's one of the hardest, it is one of the hardest, but it's also an opportunity. Because with crypto, what happens is that there is a new kind of asset that the governments and the regulators are looking at it in a different way. And because they're looking at it in a different way, they don't fall into all the same regulations that the traditional fiat currencies. And that opens gaps of opportunities where you can actually link and be and be more cooperative with the financial institutions, even with the financial regulators, in order to find the practical solutions to make the connections between the local currencies and the stable currency transition, so people feel that they are just having a broader access when they're getting into the stablecoin, but without the usual barriers of friction that you see many times when you're doing trading and then getting it back into fiat, because it's a different use case. People is using this to buy a cup of coffee, or to buy some bread, or to buy their breakfast, and you know, many times there is not that you cannot wait for it, and to make it universal, in means not in only one country but in different countries. That's the biggest challenge that we face and that we learn as we are expanding.
That's really interesting. Thank you. I know that James has done quite a lot of research on Reserve, and I mean, some of the research that James is doing in our team at Crypto Economics team is absolutely fabulous. So I think that it's time to give him the slot to ask you some questions, because I know there are quite a few of those.
Thanks, Martha. I mean, those are absolutely great questions. So no need for, if there's any questions that you guys were burning to ask, I think now is the time. There'll never be enough time to ask these questions. So just a friendly reminder to everyone that's on this Twitter space that we will have 15 minutes at the end for folks to ask questions. So definitely stick around if you guys have burning questions to ask. Definitely want this to be a space for the community to also have an opportunity to ask questions to both Nevin and Gabo. So the question I had was, this was perfect, because the question I had was both on the app side and the protocol side. So my understanding is that the protocol is off-chain. It's planned to be decentralized, while the app itself will be off-chain. Sorry. So the protocol is on-chain. App is off-chain. Is there a world where these will be different in the future? Is there any, like, I'm just trying to understand, I guess, where if there is any overlap, because the R tokens that will be launched on the protocol, I presume that they will be offered on the app at some point. So this kind of idea that today on the app, the concept of like an RSV, which is backed by fiat, in the future, there will be R tokens that will also be available, which may generate yield for participants. And so there's this concept of like a checking account and a savings account that will be available on the Reserve app. So there's this overlap between on-chain, off-chain. I'm just trying to understand if there's anything there that you guys can share in terms of like what you see in the future. on that respect?
Yeah, totally. So today, if you have a balance in the app, that's backed by RSV, and RSV is a very, very simplistic version of an R token, kind of with our beta version of our protocol, where it's backed by USDC, TrueUSD, and Paxos in a smart contract. But there's no decentralized governance there, and there's no insurance, and so it's a pretty different mechanism. Once the protocol launches and further R tokens start to be created, then we'll watch those R tokens. We'll see what develops, and we anticipate offering those in the app. The ones that make the most sense, that are safe and sensible to our users over the course of time. Like I said, anyone can create an R token. So, and we actually, as an initial founding team, don't intend to create R tokens ourselves. Part of our approach to decentralization there is that we will launch the platform, we'll educate people how it works. It's pretty easy to create our tokens on top of the platform, and we'll let other people do that. And so we'll watch and see what develops, but there's some natural kinds of R tokens that we anticipate will exist. And so we'll offer those in the app, per our own judgment about their safety and sensibility. And then in terms of offering off-chain versus on-chain transactions in the app, there's something that we can mention about this. This is actually kind of a recent update to our thinking, which is, we had started off the project thinking, okay, we'll start this app off-chain because it's easier, and gas prices are an issue on Ethereum, and then eventually we'll move 100% of transactions on-chain. And one thing we've realized over the course of time is, well, wait a minute, there's actually no reason not to offer both, to offer users the choice between doing transactions off-chain and on-chain. And they really just have different costs and benefits to the user, right? If you're a user in a country where things start to get more restricted, you might really value holding your coins yourself with your own wallet, and being able to transact as much as you want at a time with no limitations, and not having to worry about some company in the United States freezing your funds or something like that. Whereas for other types of users, they might like the simplicity and convenience of not having to think about their keys, not having to think about key recovery, etc., and just sort of treating it the way that they would with a Coinbase account. And the differences, extend. There's obviously, if you have the coins yourself, you can go interact with all sorts of cool things in DeFi. And we think that many of our users in the future will want to do that. And so our intention is to actually offer both off-chain and on-chain transactions with the infrastructure that RPay is building.
Something else that the off-chain version allow us to do is moving faster.
Hey, folks. Hey,
Start joining.
Yep. Hey, everybody. I think we pissed off the Web2 gods. Apologies.
Hey everyone, sorry for that.
Twitter's not happy with our DeFi conversations.
Just too many interesting things. They are jealous.
We have broke the internet officially. All righty. Well, we'll get back to momentum here. Apologies, everyone, for that. Nevin, let's get you up to speaker. Gabo as well. Let me confirm. There we go. Nevin, can you hear us?
Yep, I'm with you.
Okay,
Awesome.
I'm back as well.
Awesome, Gabo.
Is
Thanks,
everybody on?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yep, looks like we're all here. We're going to slowly regain the momentum that we had going earlier. Apologies, everyone. I think we pissed off some folks at Twitter, but we'll get back on it.
No worries. Yeah, I wanted to say something that the off-chain version of the app allow us to move faster to build the infrastructure that is required to make the transition between the local fiat currency to the stable currency in more and more countries. Because there is a window of opportunity because of the regulatory opportunities in the different markets, and the advantage of the network effects that we can generate that enable us to do that in a more efficient way. Because when we're talking about accessibility, in order to make it accessible, and it's not only about being able to create the wallet, it's also about connecting it to and being able to access it from the currency that you have been getting from a day to day, and being able to get to that. Once that you build that infrastructure of transition between fiat to crypto in many places, and make it seamless, and you have an infrastructure that make it accessible not in a couple of countries or in a few countries, but in every country of the region, for example, and then the world, then you have something else. Then you have a tool that truly enables that future where everybody have that true access to the stable currency. But the infrastructure piece, on not only on the technological part, but on the infrastructure piece and the local fiat, is something that the version that we currently have allow us to quickly expand that. And that was the first step that we have done in the few countries where we are now expanding that to more and more countries on the next few months.
Yeah, that's really cool. So like, I was thinking like as the app continues to grow, there'll be users there that'll be able to access some of these art tokens in the future that'll be powered by DAOs. And so this concept of like a traditional commercial bank or even a community bank, like the community will decide what the stable coins are, and folks that are participants on the app will decide, you know, which they feel comfortable with. So it really feels like a truly decentralized, platform where members will have access to these going forward. And I think that's really cool in the sense of we're taking kind of the power back from these commercial banks and kind of deciding on our own, you know, instead of being forced to leverage a particular fiat currency. And so I think that's definitely a win for the community as the Reserve Protocol plans to launch in the near future.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I did, I didn't set out trying to disrupt banking or take power away from banks. We really thought about it more in terms of like the, just the people out there and what they do or don't have access to. But yeah, I mean, if this works to the degree that we think it will, then it really will do what you're saying.
So, James, you mind if I jump in on the governance question?
Yeah, go ahead. Jump right in.
Cool. So yeah, James and I were having a discussion earlier in a thread with each other about Reserve and our token. If you have these tokens governed by their own DAOs, like over time, like what do you see in the future of DeFi, like in comparison to like all these other stablecoin projects? Like, how do you see this being more impactful by aggregating, these types of yields?
Well, there's a couple things. There's kind of a short-term possibility and a long-term possibility in my view. In the short term, I think we've already started to see interesting experiments with sort of indirectly managed yield-bearing stablecoin assets, like OUSD or even like the Yearn assets, and a couple others, where that allows a user to get access to like DeFi yield without having to directly manage the capital themselves. What we haven't really seen yet, in my opinion, is a governance mechanism that is truly sufficiently decentralized for that kind of approach. And so what that means is that there's kind of a legal question that nobody really wants to talk about out loud of like, okay, but those stable coins that are backed by a diversity of different assets, and someone is in the background pulling the strings and choosing what they are they securities? And I think it's a legitimate question. I think that that's the reason why we haven't actually seen any of those really take off and get popular on centralized exchanges and really actually compete against other normal vanilla fiat-backed stablecoins like USDC or Tether. And I think that with the Reserve Protocol and with the governance approach that we're taking, even from day one, we can create these asset-backed stablecoins that accrue yield in a way where they truly will not be securities, because of the nature of the governance, because of who created them, and so on and so forth. And so I think that presents a really interesting opportunity where maybe the sort of DeFi yield mechanisms that continue to evolve can be baked into a stablecoin that any exchange and any user around the world is allowed to hold and trade without any sort of legal concerns. And so we'll see if that comes to pass, but that's my anticipation. In the long term, the main difference is that there really aren't. If you look at it, at least I've said this before, and some people disagree with me, but I have still yet to find another project. I really haven't seen any credible attempt to produce stablecoins that are not pegged to fiat currencies. There's algorithmic stablecoins that are backed by other things, but they're still pegged in their value with their oracles and so on to fiat currencies. People have talked about trying to do some sort of decentralized CPI or something like that, but we really haven't seen a way of doing that yet. And so I think the big differentiator in the long term is that we are really putting a large amount of our effort into figuring out how do we have a stable coin that is not attached to any government or central bank and is kind of its own private currency. And so, yeah, like I said, there's many barriers to getting there. Not saying that we know for sure we'll get there, but that's the big difference in my mind.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I'm wondering, like, because of the viability of, let's say, the future of tokenized assets is pretty important to the protocol. Nevin, like, is there any work that you're thinking about in terms of like helping to facilitate or expedite the tokenization of assets, because it is highly critical to the success of, let's say, the Reserve Protocol and the R token?
We as of now, we don't see ourselves as a tokenization project or company. We're intending to leave that to the broad market. I think it would be a less good situation if we had been the ones to do a bunch of the early tokenization. It's better if it happens in a decentralized way. That said, I think that ultimately it's a legal and almost political question, because technologically it's pretty straightforward to tokenize, a bunch of different assets. And actually, if you think about it, like these cross-chain bridges for cryptocurrencies, like the thing that we've tokenized by far the most in crypto is other cryptocurrencies from other chains. There's like an enormous amount of tokenization happening in a relatively centralized way, and it's mostly tokenizing other cryptocurrencies. And we could do the same sorts of things with stocks and bonds and commodities and so on. And it's really just a regulatory question, I think. And so basically any involvement that we have, I think, is more likely to happen on sort of the intellectual, conversation and possibly one day political involvement when it comes to governments deciding what are we allowed to tokenize, and when we do tokenize things, who's allowed to touch those things, right? Like we already do see some experiments with like tokenized real estate properties or other securities, but they tend to have a whitelist where you can't actually hold that token unless you've gone through a certain process and a certain company has blessed your address to hold it, and that means that they can't be held by a random smart contract. But what we really think would be amazing, not just for Reserve, but for the financial world overall, is if things are tokenized, if all financial assets are tokenized in a permissionless way where anyone can hold them, just like US dollar stablecoins today. And so there's really no way to tell what's going to happen in detail on that, because it really is a question of politics and law. But one thing that I would point out is that if you think about like, there's these things that we've become used to in crypto and in DeFi of like, oh yeah, of course you can just do like a permissionless trade for an enormous amount of capital, without the funds ever leaving your private wallet in a few seconds, any hour of any day, for any asset on Ethereum or any asset on Solana or whatever. But that's actually kind of crazy and like pretty different from what it's like to trade, say, a stock, right? Um, and similarly, like with the existence of Compound and other lending protocols, like the things that are like crypto is actually starting to really deliver on the promise of cutting out the middleman. That was sort of like just a piece of rhetoric back in 2017, but it's starting to be real. And you're starting to see these like really interesting financial instruments and efficiencies in DeFi. And we tend to think of DeFi as this degenerate playground for speculation, which it kind of is today. But if you just imagine that all financial assets in the world were tokenized, including all fiat currencies and equities and so on, you'd have a lot of like major companies and even governments probably using that infrastructure, that DeFi infrastructure, to do very meaningful financial transactions in a way that probably would be lower friction. And from a legal perspective and a regulatory perspective, I think you can argue that like one of the main challenges with securities trading in the existing framework is that these exchanges have an enormous amount of private information and an enormous amount of centralized control that they could use to manipulate a market if they wanted to. And so you have to have these enormous regulatory frameworks and these watchdogs that get like streams of all of the data and can like oversee them and make sure that they don't do anything nefarious. Whereas if you compare that to an AMM on a blockchain where where transactions are public, there's actually an enormous additional amount of transparency, and there's actually a whole lot less control that the original developer, actually can exercise over those trades. So the opportunities to manipulate, especially manipulate secretly in private, are way, way fewer. So anyway, I'm rambling a little bit here, but what I'm trying to get to is that I think that the world is going to have to confront the fact that number one, tokenizing everything and having sort of permissionless programmable assets that can be traded without intermediaries and so on would be immensely valuable, I think, for financial efficiencies in markets around the world. And number two, I think that it's really interesting that actually a bunch of the rules that we had to come up with for good reason to stop certain kinds of market manipulation with centralized trading of securities may not actually be necessary in the world of DeFi, or at least not nearly as necessary. There probably will need to be some regulation, but it could potentially be way lighter. And so that's part of what gives me the belief, or at least the hope, that over the long term, everything will be tokenized. That's kind of the world that I see unfolding.
Yeah, I guess it's the challenge of knowing like the inevitable that we all think will happen. It's just a matter of when, and it's hard to say, like to your point with politics and government, how when they'll come around to it. So I think,
yeah, agreed.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I definitely wanted to save some time for other members on this Twitter space to ask questions. So Matt, do you want to see if there's any other questions out there for folks to ask both Nevin and Gabo?
Yeah. So anyone that wants to ask a question, just raise your hand or request for the speaker role, and then we can delegate that to you if you have a question.
I also understand both Nevin and Gabo, you guys are having a cool hangout session after this. So for folks that are not able to ask any questions in the next 5-10 minutes, feel free to stay. I'm sure they'll be happy to answer any of those questions that you guys have that we don't get to.
Totally. Yep. Join us in our space afterwards.
All right. Anupam, how's it going? Oh, requested the role. I'm not sure if you have the speaker privileges. Yeah, anyone else, if you have questions, feel free to request to speak.
And if you are on a laptop rather than a phone, you will have to tweet in the thread your question, because unfortunately Twitter Spaces does not allow you to ask questions on your laptop.
I'll ask a question in the meantime. So I did a good amount of work in my previous one of my previous roles in like growing developer community in Latin America. So I love that you guys are focused on LATAM, but what other regions are you guys looking at? Or are you folks looking at in terms of like emerging markets or like markets that are really in dire need of something like Reserve?
Yes, there are definitely other regions of the world, and that is something that is that we're doing. But our first goal that we have right now is to provide that access to 95% of the Spanish-speaking population in Latin America. And the reason behind that, and then expand that to completely expand that over the continent, and not only to the Spanish speaking, but over the continent. The network effects that allows, the utility that allows between the people on the same region, enables a new use case and a new understanding of what the platform is about. So we are focusing on that first before going to the next region. Certainly, we are looking in Africa. It's one of the interesting regions in the world where stable currency, volatility, and different markets. It's a matter of in every country. It's of substance in every country a solution like this as well. But as we enable this region first, then transition into more regions is applying a similar model to what we have already applied. But not only the expansion of that accessibility, but also the new utility that we are building on top of the infrastructure that we are building, things that will allow credit worthiness, things that will allow investment vehicles into the potential different art tokens that there will be. Those are things that we are enabling before expanding and going to other regions that are not on the American continent on the next few months.
Amazing. Very, very cool. Love the project. I really hope that ConsenSys, Crypto Economics, and Reserve can work together on something in the near future. But yeah, just very excited to see the future of DeFi with you folks. I don't see any further questions. James, Marta, Nevin, Gabo, if you have any other final thoughts or anything else you want to share with the community, now would be the time. But if nothing else to add, I think we can just conclude the space.
Yeah, I just wanted to both thank Nevin, Gabo, and the total community here coming together, because I think this is like a great opportunity for us to both learn about the protocol and the app. And I think as we have more of this, it's just a good thing for the total Web3 space. So we'll continue to have these conversations hopefully in the future.
Yes, we will definitely. For those of us who joined us for the first time, we actually are planning to hold Twitter Spaces every Saturday or Sunday, mostly Sundays, same time. And on regular basis, we will be featuring work that James and his team is doing on the research side of things, highlighting some of the interesting protocols that they've been doing research on. And when we are not highlighting research, we have a lot of friends and a lot of protocols. So basically, just book this time on your calendar and join in every week.
Excellent. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
I just want to end with encouraging people to build for the regular people. we on the industry, I always just talk about this, and personally, because I'm Venezuelan, over there in my country, many people had to escape and go to, and talking about millions of people had to escape because of the mismanagement of the economy and the access to stable currency. It is something that we many times take for granted, but are issues that not only in Venezuela that was the most extreme, but in many parts of the world that is ongoing. And not only the access to stable currency, but also to financial services that people, because of the region where they're located, we can change. I know that there is, so far with the bull market, there is many people that have focused on the casinos, basically, that have focused on how to make more money. And that is, whatever you go to any crypto meetups, I usually stop going to crypto meetups because what you hear about people is bragging about how much was their yield farming or the ROI. And basically, we have such an opportunity right now. Humanity have such an opportunity to change how money is actually perceived. That is not something only done for the people. But yes, we talk about in the industry a lot about financial inclusion, banking the bank, the underbank. But then when you see the places in the world where this is needed, those projects and those people that are talking about, they just write beautiful research paper, but they don't actually get in the mud and they try to fix and find the solutions for this social issue that is definitely affecting the world, because it's broadening the gap of inequality between the ones that do have access to the ones that don't. Sorry, I just end up with this rant at the end of the session, but I know that there are many builders that listen to you guys, and I just wanted to bring that topic of attention because it's possible. And that future is possible where money and all financial services are equally accessible for anyone. And we are building that, and we're building in believing that is possible. But I know that many of you guys have awesome ideas and have amazing talents and amazing teams that can truly change the world and can make the world leap forward to a better future. So that's my end thought for today.
That's beautiful, Gabo. What the internet did to information, we're hoping to do with money and finance, and so I appreciate that. Everyone here, keep building.
Amen.
All right, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Talk to you later.
All right, everyone.
Happy
Have a
Sunday.
good weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.